So hello and welcome back to the MCC Brussels Podcast. I'm Jacob Reynolds, and this week we're delighted to be joined by Angélique Ferret, MEP. Welcome.
Hello, Jacob, and nice to meet you. Thanks for your inviting.
No, pleasure. Angélique is MEP with the Rassemblement National, sitting in the Patriot for Europe group, and also this week joined by Richard Schenk, our colleague, our research fellow. Welcome.
Always happy to be here.
This week, we're going to be taking a look at the European leaders' attempt to cobble together a response to developments between Trump and Zelensky and on the Ukraine issue. We're also going to be looking at the further developments in Romania, specifically the hauling in of Călin Georgescu into the police. And we're lastly going to take a look at new developments in the ongoing NGO propaganda complex, which we've been uncovering here in the heart of the EU. First, we want to take a look at this. Every day we're recording something, and every day something is changing with regards to world politics. So I don't want us to necessarily focus on the ins and outs and the kind of battles of egos and wills that are going on the world stage, but specifically with regards to Europe. At the moment, what we're seeing is this attempt to kind of cobble together some response to everything that's going on. We've had, for example, Ursula von der Leyen today announcing the possible easing of budgetary restrictions to provide more money for defense armaments. We've had a big series of conferences. There seems to be another gathering of leaders almost every day to try and hammer out some new position to what's going on. At the heart of this, Angélique, is this sense that European leaders have kind of been asleep for so long on defense and industrial questions that now they're kind of left, as it were, a little bit lost. What's your take on what's been going on?
Yeah, we could say that I think they were under the NATO protection, NATO, and following the American geostrategy, especially in this war in Ukraine. And now that they realize with Trump's election that they won't be anymore on the same path, because Trump would like, or says he would like to negotiate peace. They're like, oh my God, we're naked in a field. We don't know how to protect, and we have no defense. But I do also think it might be a Trojan horse to make the federal Europe. So let's stay very careful about that.
Yeah, I want to come to that in a second, but Angélique, Marine Le Pen been making lots of very interesting comments, I think, on this issue. But one line that really stood out, I thought was really important and correct, where she was talking about how Europe has completely lost its digital sovereignty or any sense of having a digital industry to America. And so the question, for example, of whether America might turn off Starlink for Ukraine, that's Elon Musk's platform, that's kind of exposes one of these many areas in which Europe's kind of completely out the race.
They're out of race, but I don't think it's because they were unskilled or they were lazy. I do think they were traitors. They are traitors. And I do think they were, and they are, they were, because with Trump it might be a bit different, completely submitted under the Americans' point of view and interests. For example, our president in France, as I am a French map, sold Alstom for a price under the market price to the Americans. And it is just one example. He sold also a nuclear turbine that was French to the Americans. So if we have a problem in our nuclear industry, providing electricity with our central nuclear central, we can't if the Americans say, oh no, you won't have the turbine. So it's really, I do think, high treason.
No, very correct. I think this question of Europe having no sense of its own kind of industrial or military interest is very important. Richard, one of the things I've been struck by is, of course, later this week there's going to be a European Council meeting. But it's very interesting, isn't it, how whenever some crisis appears on the world stage in geopolitics, it's actually interesting that it's not the EU that's people's first port of call. Instead, whether you like or not what the meetings are about, instead they go and have their own meetings, different leaders in different formats. It shows you that ultimately when push comes to shove, it's a question of national interest and national leaders getting together rather than necessarily the EU. But what have you made of these kind of series of meetings and attempt to hammer out a position?
Well, as you already said, Europe is basically defenseless without the Americans, because our defense capabilities have been bled dry over the decades. And now without the Americans, we don't have on the short term, we don't have any power projection capabilities into Ukraine to achieve any of these proposed policy goals. I mean, you can make a lot of pictures with Zelensky, and a lot of meetings and statements have taken place, but we cannot project our power into Ukraine. So we have to take something that is on the short term available. And at EU level, we basically have nothing regarding defense currently. And the only thing that we have are regional cooperations on several issues. I mean, for example, the Scandinavians or the Baltics and Poland are already cooperating because they are immediately at the Russian border. They have a very similar defense interests, or the Mediterranean countries are cooperating in some fashion. So, but ultimately, the only level that is somehow still capable of managing this crisis is the national level. So this is why we have this regional gatherings, and also if you're listening to EU leaders currently, then they say, okay, we need to revive, for example, the Weimar format between Germany, France, and Poland. So this is also some form of intergovernmental structures, because these are the only things that actually work. Nothing at the EU Commission level, for example, is adequate to address this security concerns.
Yeah, and then coming to von der Leyen's big announcement, I mean, is one of these, in a way, classic EU announcements where the number sounds really good. So it's like, we're going to free up 800 billion euros of money to spend on defense. And then the devil is always in the detail. What did you make of her kind of proposals and announcements, Anjali?
First, this announcement is, again, a part of this Trojan horse I was talking about. Because the budget of the EU, and I'm in budget committee, so is 200 billions. And we've already loaned 700 billions for the COVID crisis. In 2027, we'll have 30% of our expenses that will be to pay back this loan. So they're already trying to figure out, EU is already trying to figure out how to pay back this loan. And Ursula von der Leyen wants to make another loan of $800 billion. It makes me think of people, who are in a poor social condition and have made a loan to pay the TV and can't pay back the loan. And so, I'll go to see a shark loan and make another loan to pay the first loan. So it sounds crazy. It will probably destroy the national economies who are already poor, whether it's the French economy, the German economy, but other economy are not very, very well, in good condition. So making these debts, and this time it will be a common debt, probably, around, if I have good memory, it's around 115 billions will be a common debt. It means that it won't be a loan that the EU will deal for each country, but it will be 115 billion as a European debt, mutualized, if possible to say. So it will have to be backed on something, because the bank wants a loan to be backed on something. What will it be? Probably the private economies, probably the private savings of the European citizens. That's what have been said several times. So it's a way to once again create this super federal state that is everything except democratic, because we'll talk about Karlin Georgescu later. It's more a Fourth Reich, to say, if I could say that, or a second Soviet state. And then, by the debt, it will put all the nation in slavery. So that we have to be very, very careful about that.
Yeah. Richard, I know you've been following some of the detail of these proposals, but what do you make of Ursula von der Leyen's kind of big reveal that suddenly money's available. I mean, because on one level, it's kind of amusing, isn't it, that for ages, countries like France, for example, the Commission's been saying, no, you've got to get your deficits under control. You can't spend, for example, your cash on pensioners or on heating or things like this. But now that Ursula von der Leyen has decided that defense is important, now you can spend whatever you like on it.
This is some kind of ritual at EU level that happens every 5 years, because 5 years ago, almost exactly 5 years ago, the Green Deal was the hot topic. And then the EU Commission announced that they will invest 1 trillion euros into the European economy to finance the Green Deal. And last autumn, we asked, where is this money? Where is this 1 trillion euro? You should have noticed something else of it. And actually, it was in the end, it was 2.6% that were actually budgeted and actually spent out of this 1 trillion euro. So from this experience, I would say that with this package, a similar thing would happen, because it's actually quite easy. The EU cannot create money out of nothing. It has either to take it from the member states, and as you pointed out, they already broke, so that you cannot squeeze the member states even harder, or you create some kind of taxation or tariffs or whatever. But tariffs we cannot create tariffs because amidst a trade war with the US, and do you want to tax the EU citizens and businesses even more? I mean, where should the EU take this money from? Should they print money? Okay, then we have inflation. So it's basically not without cutting the budget. It's another point. It's not basically just an empty promise.
Just your regular reminder to make sure that if you're enjoying the work we do on the MCC Brussels podcast and want to see some of the other videos that we're publishing on a whole range of topics, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us on audio, make sure you're subscribed wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify or Apple. And also leave us a comment. Let us know how you're enjoying the podcast and what topics you'd like us to cover next. Right, next up, I wanted to tackle something we've tackled on the podcast before, actually, but is the kind of the feud, the democratic crisis in Romania and the repeated attempts to block Călin Georgescu from achieving any kind of electoral success. The latest kind of twist in this saga is him being hauled in by the police for extensive questioning. There's various stories about bodyguards and cash being discovered and all kinds of crazy things being cooked up. There's now a brewing crisis about the involvement of NGOs organizing anti-Călin Georgescu protests and so on. But Richard, you've been also delving into the court decision that originally annulled, basically cancelled, overturned the first round of the presidential election that he won. Remind us what happened, and then we'll talk about how outrageous it was that he was called in by the police.
I will begin a bit with history, because it's something that you have to understand. Romania is a semi-presidential system, just like France is. So the post of president is quite influential. And basically every presidential election since 1990 was contested. There were several scandals around the presidents. Basically, no president was not involved in any kind of political turmoil. For example, Traian Băsescu, he was elected twice for president. Twice parliament suspended him. And twice he fought his back into the, as if through a referendum, into the presidential seat. And back then, when it was all with the blessing of the Romanian Constitutional Court, so we have a established pattern of behavior. And back then, when this happened with President Băsescu, it was the EU leaders back then who said it's a breach of rule of law. Angela Merkel came out in favor of Băsescu because he was basically deposed and without sufficient grounds to depose him from his position. So with this in our mind, we come to the 2024 elections, and then suddenly Călin Georgescu received 2 million votes in the first round of the presidency. Then the Constitutional Court issues a recount. They confirm these 2 million votes are still there. They were valid. The procedure was okay. And 1 week afterwards, they say, no, sorry, this is all, the entire first round of the presidential elections is cancelled. And they present, so people who listen to us, I hold 28 pages of evidence into the camera.
Oh, we should say evidence with sketches, yeah.
And if you look into this this evidence is from the Romanian secret services. Most of it is blackened, the crucial parts. Other parts are quite insignificant. And the last pages are from another civil administration service that basically says it was everything fine. So it was only the first pages made by the secret services who were used by the courts as an evidence. And I think anybody, you don't have to be a lawyer to understand that this kind of evidence is not even enough to bring you in jail after you did some shoplifting. Yeah, this is and yet alone to cast 2.1 million votes aside and to cancel an entire election. They say stuff like, oh yeah, we found 130 TikTok accounts with a maximum of 500,000 views. So, or that somebody picked up on Georgescu's TikTok account, and he during 5 weeks, 2 weeks before the election, and that most likely this was some kind of state actor in behind this. Regarding this evidence, we cannot say anything of if this is true or not. So it is a very, very strange procedure, to put it mildly. And I have not much love exactly for Călin Georgescu personally and his political positions, but I even have less love in my heart for the Romanian Secret Service, who is not exactly the most trustworthy institution in this planet. And amidst this, so even if there was some Russian interference, we believe the Secret Service. On top of that, now here the EU comes into play, because Thierry Breton, the former commissioner, he was stupid enough to speak about this on French television. Then we asked about the EU about this comments of Thierry Breton, and now the EU Commission has confirmed that there are actually 2 procedures against Romania because of the Digital Services Act. And we don't know anything about these procedures, because the Digital Services Act that is supposed to protect democracy and the integrity of the Romanian elections is actually a secret procedure itself. So we don't know much about what the EU is actually doing in this entire turmoil.
Yeah, but important to know that we did actually, when you say we, it was us as MCC Brussels actually, almost a confirmation by mission that the EU was in some way kind of involved in this process with the Romanian Constitutional Court. And I mean, in this report, you were taking me through it earlier, and it reads almost like the Constitutional Court had just discovered what TikTok is. So they're like, there's an account with 500,000. Can you believe it? It's like they've literally just discovered what TikTok is.
It has to be Russia, isn't it?
Like nobody could have 500,000 followers.
There are 3 pages into this that they say, oh, Russia is very dangerous. Okay, cool, thank you for this.
There's a piece of insight. But yeah, Angeline, I mean, there's come in a second to the actual semi-arrest of Georgescu, but this isn't something that's happened in kind of isolation. This is something that fits a particular pattern. As we said, Thierry Breton was proudly saying, oh, we can't have these kinds of people winning elections. But this is in some sense becoming the modus operandi for the EU.
Kind of. We hope not, but apparently the elites who are running EU, the technocrats, don't really want. They are okay with democracy or with what people want, as long as they want the same thing than them. Sorry, and when it goes against what they want, then democracy is just an idea like that, and they decide to pressure. Sometimes through NGOs, try to go in the national politics. That was one of the questions in Hungary, if I remember well. And concerning Călin Georgescu, I wrote a question to the Commission, especially about this Digital Service Act and how they were intrusive. And they work as they have nothing to explain to us. That's the same with the money they give to NGOs. You were saying that in Romania there are some strikes, and it's a bit, as you say, shady in these areas, but also in Serbia for the moment, and in Georgia. You have strikes from the people who want their vote to be heard. Because apparently, through this decision of the court, from the arrest of Călin Georgescu, the voters for him, the number of voters have increased.
Yes.
So they tried, or the court, I would some people will call me complotist if I say they tried. Who are they?
Yeah.
But the Constitutional Court stopped that election in the middle. And then they realized that Carlin Georgescu is still very famous. It has nothing to do with the TikTok accounts that they've discovered and the TikTok network. And they are like, oh, but this man could win. And is not pro-EU. I mean, pro-EU in the way pro-woke.
He's not their man, yes.
Yeah, he's not their man. He's not a wokeist. He's not a crazy leftist liberal in a sense, social liberal, you know, like...
He's not going to be pushing gender ideology in schools. We can say that for certain.
Exactly. That's summarized perfectly. So maybe, but it's just... I'm just talking for me. Maybe they're trying to find other ways to stop him to go to the presidential election again. Yeah. Or maybe they have serious clues and proofs. But this paper you showed us is terrific. I mean, terrific is horrible. It shows that their proof are just allegations, suspicions. It's defamatory. And...
Thierry Breton already said why this is important to everyone. If you're not invested in Romania, no problem, because Thierry Breton already said that it's next. Maybe it's Germany, or then we have Czech elections in autumn, and then you can go on. Every European Union member state is now basically under the threat that there will be some EU investigations into its elections, and I think it's very hard to find an election where there was no foreign interference, and every time when now this should become a case for the EU Commission to launch investigations into national elections. This is why we should worry about this Romanian case, because it will not stop at Romania.
Yes, I agree with you. I do think it's a laboratory, a test to see if they can go this far or not. Because another day it will be in France, Hungary, Serbia, anyway.
Yeah, Romania is in kind of the EU periphery from a middle regarding media and public perception. So they hope to get away with this without anybody noticing.
Yeah, I do think.
And also it's very important because of the war in Ukraine. But I think it will not stop there.
So we've alluded to this already, but one thing in which we at MCC Brussels, and is becoming a really big story right across Europe as well, is the network that the EU has established around funding its kind of cheerleaders in the NGO space. I mean, you must have seen some of this, especially on the budget committee. I know this is a big topic for you guys as well, but readers can check out our report. They can also check out one of the deep dives we've released with Thomas Farsi on this precise question. So yeah, to check that out. But honestly, revelations in recent weeks about not just the EU funding environmentalist NGOs to lobby for Frans Timmermans' policies, but also the way in which they've been funding everything from think tanks to anti-disinformation campaigns. But what's your take on these, Beam?
Let's try to be clear. I do think that it's propaganda, clearly propaganda. Wokeist propaganda, globalist propaganda with the citizens' money. And once again, it's the kind of I would say it's the leftist soft power. That's how they work. The Romania problem that we were talking before is the hard leftist work. But this is the soft power. They give millions to NGOs to intervene and interfere in national policy, like they did in Hungary with this NGO who is also financed by Soros and who is pro-immigrant, pro-migration. And they do push their agenda this way. They also corrupted some maps and even French deputy to be pro-green agenda, Green Deal, with some money. And we asked them, I did ask them in budget committee to give us how much and to who. We're still waiting.
Yeah, then Richard, I know we're preparing our listeners and viewers should know, but we're preparing lots of new revelations on this, but we don't want to spoil the surprise too much. But what have you've been working on the NGO issue actually for a long time, Lars, but what's your take on this, the way this has been exposed as a whole network?
Well, the specific scandal that arose about a year ago was around the LIFE program. What is the LIFE program? It was created in 1992 together with the Habitats and Birds Directive. Maybe our listeners know some Natura 2000 areas in there next to their homes, and these areas were created by the EU. But at the same time, there were also NGOs created by the EU that should act as watchdogs for this Natura 2000 areas. This is a very substantial program, up to 2 billion euros per year that goes into this program. Most of it is used okayish, but of course these organizations became fat and more influential over the years, and they began lobbying at the EU, and they began lobbying for more and more regulations, for the expansion of nature conservation areas, for more funding for themselves. And this began, and at one point, after 2019, when Franz Timmermans took over the Commission with the Green Deal, he even allowed these NGOs to receive EU funding for lobbying the EU Commission itself. So this was now, or the European Parliament or the member states, so they can receive EU funding for not caring for these Natura 2000 areas, but to interfere with EU politics. And this was the specific problem. This amount of money, this so-called direct lobbying, was only about 16 million euros. But still, the other 2 billion euros that they receive remains there, that they use for indirect lobbying. Of course, they build up their base. They gather more and more specialist knowledge, so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So you see that how the EU used their NGOs very specifically very strategically over decades to interfere with member states' politics. And this is kind of a template that they want to export in more and more areas. So I think it's very right that the Hungarian government now asks for all NGO contracts to be revealed, not only for the LIFE program, because we can very much expect that there's going to be more and more.
Yeah, and Angeline, I mean, the people who kind of run the NGO industrial complex love to talk about transparency. They love to accuse other organizations of lacking in transparency. But one of the things this has revealed, and this Hungarian demand to make the contracts kind of available to the member states proves it, that when it comes to the funding of NGOs, there's actually not that much transparency.
Oh no, it's a game with two different rules, a rule for the states, the member states, and a rule for the Commission. Mm-hmm. And the Commission has nothing to prove or nothing to show. It doesn't have to be transparent at all, because it's the Commission, the full power, full potency Commission. And then the states have to explain and that's normal to be transparent. I'm for it, but the Commission has to be transparent. And the Account Court, the European Account Court, regularly says, the Commission is completely non-transparent, and it should show where the money goes and to who. For example, we have a program for development in foreign countries who are underdeveloped. I'm just thinking of that example. We bought for a few millions some mixer, the thing to do your smoothie. And then we send them to Africa in a school, so that was supposed to be underdeveloped, where they had no electricity. That's an example of the stupidity that they do by ideology with your money, and they think they have nothing to show to you. They don't have account to give you back.
Yeah. And Richard, I mean, this is having some fallout in national countries, in the member states as well, right? I mean, there's a big debate now kicking off in Germany, for example, about the funding of NGOs that have been not just engaged in some rather amusing and pretty pathetic attempts at creating propaganda, but also obviously the CDU-CSU has called for transparency on the role of NGOs in kind of funding and organizing anti kind of conservative protests across Germany.
Yeah, under the Scholz government, the funding for these NGOs that were loosely in the green ecosystem, on political ecosystem, ballooned. And for example, they also removed the requirement for funding that they should not swear an oath, but that they should sign up to the values of the German constitution, which is also already tells you a lot how extremist some of these organizations were that received funding by the German federal government. And during the election campaign, in January, February, all these organizations came out against the opposition, against the CDU, CSU, and also the AfD, of course. They organized demonstrations. They were on social media campaigns. A lot of political pressure that were put on the opposition. That was put on the opposition by organizations financed by the current government. And this is a very new development that we have a government is basically orchestrating and giving money to organizations to protest against, to put political pressure on the opposition. This is why the CDU, CSU are there to ask some questions.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to leave it there. There's, as I say, big revelations coming from MCC Brussels on the NGO space and our campaign for EU Doge. So make sure you keep your eyes peeled on our X and our YouTube account. But for now, thanks so much for joining us on the MCC Brussels podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe, leave a comment if you enjoyed the video. But for now, thanks so much, Angeline.
Thanks to you, Jacob.
And Richard, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks to you, Richard.
It was a pleasure.
It was too.
Mm-hmm.